Hello everyone, my name is John Michael Bushman and welcome back to Master Duel. It's finally here. I'm finally getting around to it. This has been a promise that I made to myself ever since I started playing Yu-Gi-Oh on Master Duel. It's to finally play heroes. This, at least for me, seems to be a rite of passage among Yu-Gi-Oh players that you need to have played at least one hero deck in your lifetime. Whether it's good or bad, it has to be a hero deck. And with the release of the hero structure deck here on Master Duel some time ago, relatively recently, at least at the time of me recording this video, you can finally make it. And I'm going to put an image on screen that shows you the cards that are missing from this deck, excluding the generic staples, of course, like the removal tools and the hand traps, of course. You're really only short a couple of cards, but they're all yours, so that still makes this deck extremely expensive if you're gonna craft it from scratch. But the structure deck eliminates a lot, and I mean a lot, of the budget down. And I did get somewhat lucky way back when I was opening those, I forgot what kind of packs they were. They were like these milestone celebration packs and whatnot. And I got Stratos, a Royal Stratos at that, from those packs. So that's one less Stratos out of my collection and whatnot. And as I was crafting the rest of the decks from scratch, well, it seems I was made to get this deck up and running because I got Royal Rare Plasma. So there is that. So, heroes. A classic Yu-Gi-Oh archetype, a deck that has pilots running it for possibly as long as the game has been existing. This deck has gone through so many iterations that I simply cannot give this deck justice, like, at all. I can give you guys what I have experienced and what I have learned in the 2 weeks that I've spent practicing with this deck. And believe me when I say, heroes, for as much of a fan favorite archetype that they are, this is not, and I repeat, heroes are not an easy deck to pilot at all, because the lines that are given to you are not straightforward and linear in the slightest. There are always micro decisions that you will make as you go through your combos in order to end up on the board that you want to end up on. Now, this, from what I've been told, is the simplest version of hero at the current moment. There are more competent, I guess, builds of hero nowadays, thanks to the Dark Hero package that came out of Supreme Darkness. Well, that's the name of the set in paper, that has Dark Emperor Neos at the helm, which acts as a sort of removal tool alongside the other Dark Hero stuff. But I'm going to stick with the classic, and I'm going to stick with the board that ends with, ideally, Plasma, Dark Law, Shining Neos, although you get him off of Favorite Contact, DPE, and any other flavor of, removal tools that you have either in your back row or in your hand. Those are your that's your win con, basically. Those are the stuff that you would want to end on, but getting there is going to be a journey and a half, and I believe this deck is going to go on for pretty long, because I will only explain what I know and what I have experienced playing with this deck for 2 weeks, and I will be posting the gameplay at a later date, because I want this video in particular to just be the deck tech and to explain the intricacies and why learning this deck has been an absolute roller coaster of emotions for me. So, we're going to start with the biggest garnet in this deck, and this is quite literal as well. We have Elemental Hero Neos. He is a necessity in order to make Favorite Contact work, and also for a line that involves Infernal Devicer. We'll get to him in a bit. He's only really here as a soft break, although in extremely desperate situations, you can summon him onto the field. He does have respectable stats after all. And then, next in the hero lineup is Increase. You only really get him off of Faris and no one else. There are 2 copies in most of the builds, at least the classic builds, as I would call it, that have Increase, but more often than not, you only see 1 copy of this guy, because honestly, 1 is all you need. But as MBT would put it, sometimes you have to fear God, and having 2 is about the furthest you're gonna go with this guy, because otherwise he's just a soft garnet. Although his effect is you can search a Where was that? Oh my god, I am already tripping up. Holy shit. There we go. You can special summon a vision hero from your deck, which is usually just Vion, and then you keep comboing from there. That's literally his only purpose in the deck, and we're now going to move on to the next hero, which is Denier. One of the more recent pieces of support, well, at least recent but at the time of me recording this video. There's actually also now new hero support that came out of the Tactical Tri-Pack. Surprisingly. They're still printing new cards for this archetype. Jesus Christ. They don't call this the thickest archetype for a reason, because they will just not stop printing cards for this. Anyway, going back to Denier, this guy has been jammed in with Destiny Hero Malicious. You know, these two are partners in crime for a reason. Any two monsters basically go into Verte Anaconda. You guys know the meme. But these two form the backbone of the link climbing aspect of heroes nowadays. And what Denier does is, if this guy is normal special summoned, you basically put Malicious on top of your deck, whether it be from deck, graveyard, or banished. It sometimes recycles a Malicious that has already been banished by its effect, so that you can summon another copy of itself. And then its secondary effect is he can just special summon himself out of the graveyard, but it's only a once per duel effect, so there is that. And you need to control a Destiny hero, which at that point is usually Destroy Your Phoenix Enforcer. And then, of course, Stratos, I mean, never leave him with... You know what? We're not going to use that art. We're going to use the shiny one. There we go. So that you guys can be flashbang for a little. This guy is Ash Blossom Bait, if there ever was one. But if the effect does indeed push through, you can just add any hero from your deck to your hand. And that's literally any hero. Preferably, what you would add is Faris, since this is a guy that just jumpstarts your combos from there. Or you can use A Hero Lives to bait out the Ash Blossom and or Search Negation and whatnot. And then you can, you know, just show your opponent, hey, I already had Faris in hand the whole time. So there is that. And we're going to skip over the other two because we're going to move on to Faris. This guy is the, I guess I would call the primary starter. It's not even like Stratos. No, Stratos just fills in the gaps. Faris is your actual starter. You don't even summon him normally. You discard a hero, special summon him, and then you place a vision hero from your deck into the spell and trap zone. Hint, hint, it's always increase. And you start comboing off from there. Oh god, it's lagging a little. There we go. Then once Faris has done his job, that's pretty much it. You can use him in a plethora of ways. You can banish him off of Miracle Fusion and whatnot. His typing is also pretty convenient because a lot of the stuff in the extra deck requires different attributes and or types depending on the kind of fusion material that the monster needs. Then we go back to the Vision Heroes. We have Vion. This guy would normally just send Shadow Mist to the graveyard so that you can keep comboing off from there. But we're gonna move on to that kind of worms later. Basically, once Vion does that, he's already done his job. There is a secondary effect where you banish a hero from your graveyard, you add Polymerization from deck to hand. This effect, at least for me, comes up very often, but I don't know how correct that option is. Because more often than not, he's only really a foolish burial for heroes, and I do not know how often people use the secondary effect right here. Although it is a necessity, especially if you just want to push for game, because certain heroes like Trinity here helps you close out games. But otherwise, Vine is only really just foolish burial for the entire archetype. And then of course, Shadow Mist. Now this is the card that trips me up more often than not, because if she is special summoned, at least I assume this is she, and given her curves, she can add a change quick play spell. Wow, holy shit. Quick play spell from deck to hand, usually mass change, and you would usually convert any one of your heroes on board into Dark Law. Now, one thing you will trip up when you're going through your combos, Shadow Mist effect, you can only use one of them per turn and only once per turn. You have to be very careful when you're doing your combos, because once you search with a hero, if you send her to the graveyard, you can no longer use her special summon effect. So be very careful when using Shadow Mist. And that's pretty much her only purpose in the deck. Again, typing, level can be important depending on where you go. Although, there is only one hero in this deck, at least in this build of the deck, that is more important than anything else, and it's Liquid Soldier. Because he is the bridge to get you into Absolute Zero, which is, I think, your only board wipe? Yes, Absolute Zero is our only board wipe in the deck, although he is the only, like, strict normal summon in this deck. but he is more of a recovery tool than anything else because he will special summon a hero from graveyard, usually Shadow Mist, so because everyone else in the main deck are heroes anyway. And then if he is used as fusion material for a hero monster and sent to the graveyard or banished, so either by polymerization or miracle fusion, you draw 2 cards and you discard 1 card. This would usually make you end up getting your non-engine stuff, or you can use that to discard a malicious that has been stranded in hand for, like, I don't know, for ever since your combo started going. Speaking of malicious, here he is, freshly unlimited to 3, and that's why I bought the structure deck in the first place. I'm still honestly pretty scared of this guy, but I don't really see him on the ladder in spite of his power level. Probably because a lot of stuff in the game these days are just way more powerful than what malicious used to represent. Especially during the heyday of Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer here. So yeah, you can still use a small Destiny Hero package, just as a link climbing tool, but I don't know how efficient that is, especially in days like this. So do keep that in mind. And then, of course, Plasma, the only main deck boss monster, if I remember correctly, that is worth a damn. Just tribute 3 monsters, especially if you're under maxi. This guy is golden against certain strategies, but he is surprisingly very easy to out because of his low attack stat. Although 1900 means that a lot of normal summons, at least the more commonly played ones, don't exactly have an easy way to out Plasma in terms of battle. But Yu-Gi-Oh being Yu-Gi-Oh, players will usually find a way to get around Plasma's effect. Although, he does have a secondary effect where he can equip a monster and then he gains attack equal to half the original attack of the monster he equipped. But that's usually a turn 3 play rather than a turn 2 one. And then, moving on to the Spells and Traps. Polymerization, a classic, has been in any and all hero decks ever since. Reinforcement of the army can be used to just plug the holes in any hand that you may be lacking. Preferably, you're only really searching, Reinforcement, Rota only really searches the level 4 lower ones. Preferably, if you don't have Stratos and you don't have a way into Faris, you would usually use Rota for that. Or, if you're in a pinch, you can use it to search Vion, or, more often than not, it's Ash Blossom Bait. Then Miracle Fusion, you would usually use this to fuse into either Elemental Hero Flame Wingman, or you can even use Polymerization for it. It's usually searched off of Sunrise, but we'll get to the actual deck in a bit. Then, of course, a Hero Olives. If you don't have any monsters on the board, you can just plop one onto the field from the deck. The art on this thing is... Wow, I'm just realizing... I think these are 2 heroes on the art, and then you have a... I don't remember the name of this monster, but I do know that it's an old-ass monster from way back when. So, this is a special summon, so it doesn't eat up your very precious normal summon, which you would only use 1, because if you use it, you're probably never summoning in the normal way ever again, at least for the turn. Then, Freshly Unlimited, Fusion Destiny. A lot of the stuff in this deck are darks anyway, so this is not exactly a Garnet, and you have so many ways to get into your other stuff that would usually involve Fusion Destiny anyway, so I can see this being shaved down to maybe only 3 copies, or rather just 2 copies rather than the 3 that you see here, because it can get a little bricky, but sometimes Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer can hard carry certain matchups, so do keep that in mind. Then Mask Change is only really here to convert any hero that you have on board into Dark Law. That's its only purpose in the deck, and you can only tutor it off of Shadow Mist. So again, be very careful when you're going through your combos and you're going to decide on what to do with Shadow Mist. And then finally, Favorite Contact. It's only ever really here to summon out Shining Neos. And speaking of Shining Neos, we're gonna move on now to the extra deck. But before we move to the extra deck, every other non-engine in here are hand traps like Ash Blossom and Max C, and then Forbidden Droplet in particular works really well with this deck, solely because of the fact that a lot of the stuff in this deck works in the graveyard. So discarding stuff is not a problem for heroes in the slightest. So Forbidden Droplet is the mass negation of choice for this deck, and not Dark Ruler no more, because this archetype is extremely combat centric, and they do not want to skip on their combat at all. So now finally, moving on to the extra deck, we have first Mask Hero Dark Law. This is such a travesty that this wasn't included both in the structure deck here on Master Duel and also in the Duel Ignition deck in paper for the OCG. Or is it Asian English? Oh, wait, no, yeah, it's Asian English. I forgot about that. They had to buy it, unfortunately. I guess, you know, that's Konami's way of saying, hey, if you like the archetype, you know, you have to buy Dark Claw. So there is that. It's a Macrocosmos, a one-sided Macrocosmos at that. And then there's this often forgotten effect that Dark Claw has, where if your opponent would shoot or something and add it to their hand, you're going to banish a random card from your opponent's hand. And that is insane amounts of value. Up next in our lineup of fusion monsters, we have Blast. And I don't know what in the Kamen Rider this guy's referencing to, but he is your only form of spell trap removal here in this deck. As you can see here, pay 500 life points, you bounce a spell trap back to hand. This is pretty damn good these days, especially with a lot of spells and traps that get destroyed and have an effect. Definitely more common these days, so having him just respond to one, maybe two of them that do the thing. Definitely a toolboxy option, not something that you go into often with mass change. And he also has another effect where if you special summon him, you can just have the attack of a monster that your opponent controls. So there is that. Then up next we have Sunrise. He does have an effect in combat where if you attack with a hero, you destroy a card on the field. So rather than have your monsters attack into your opponent's monsters, you can just pop them instead. Although more often than not, he is used as a bridge to get into Miracle Fusion, and that's pretty much it. There is another thing where he buffs the stuff that you have on board depending on the number of attributes, but usually you would only end up with like 2 to 3 depending on the end board that you have. So Sunrise is more often than not just used as a step ladder. Then of course Absolute Zero, the only board wipe in this deck. That's literally all he does, and that's why you have Liquid Soldier in this deck, just so that you can get into Absolute Zero. And his effect sadly has been changed because there was a time period where if you bounce him back into the extra deck, his effect would still trigger because he technically still left the field. But these days it no longer works that way, so he has to end up in the graveyard or some other zone that is not the extra deck in order for him to do his effect. And up next we have Trinity. He's just big number, go up. Then he can attack 3 monsters, and having 5,000 attack and attacking into monsters that are potentially only like 2,500 below, that's definitely gonna sting. And I did have a practice, not exactly practice game, but in one of my games that I was training with this deck, Trinity nearly killed my opponent with the amount of damage that I was dealing. And up next we have Destroy Phoenix Enforcer. I mean, this guy was a terror in the meta way back when, but now that we have so many answers to this guy, he is just relegated into what you see in front of you, unfortunately. There are certain edge case scenarios where you would not summon him and you would summon one of your other Destiny heroes instead, but more often than not you're using him to you're using his effect to pop a card you control, usually him, and pop a card on the field, which is usually your opponent's stuff, and you would rinse and repeat until your opponent can no longer live or something like that. His effect to reduce the attack for every hero card in your graveyard. This is why a lot of hero combos tend to just jam everything into their graveyard as fast as possible so that DPE can reduce their attack by a large margin. Then up next, the win con of the deck, Shining Neos Wingman. You just need an elemental heroes and a Wingman fusion monster. This is why there are lines that go into Flame Wingman Infernal Rage as much as possible, because you need this guy, unfortunately. So if you don't get into elemental hero Flame Wingman Infernal Rage, or Infernal Rage as most people would prefer to call him, this is definitely a dead card in your extra deck, and he does a lot. And he non-targeting pops cards on the field equal to the number of different attributes among the monsters that are on the field. So if you're facing off against a deck that has that plays with a lot of attributes, there's definitely a more than 2 pops, but on average he just pops for 2, and then he also inflicts some burn for some weird reason. Then again, if you're building after Wingman, then definitely makes sense. Then, of course, Infernal Rage. He's only really here to search Favorite Contact, which is his line of text here. There are edge case scenarios where if you special summon, or rather if you fusion summoned him using Elemental Hero Neos over here, you can tribute him to cheat out an Elemental Hero monster from your extra deck, or hell, even the deck, and you ignore summoning conditions. But more often than not, he is used as a step ladder to get into Favorite Contact. And finally, wake up your elemental hero. This is just a big bungus that you can go into, recycle every monster that you have in your graveyard and banish pile using favorite contact, and then you make this guy so that you can have a chance to have a do-over with your combos all over again. But more often than not, he's only here as a stepladder because of his light typing. And then for the link monsters, this is where stuff gets slightly more complicated. Wonder Driver, he's usually the last link monster you would go into in your turn 1 combo, and his only purpose really is to be a guy that sets a polymerization, fusion, or change quick play spell in the graveyard, and then you just set it onto the field. You would need to special summon to a zone that he points to, so usually down. And he would do his thing. And then he does have a secondary effect, but again, his only purpose in the deck is for the first line of text right there. And once you're done with that, you would usually go into Dread Decimator after the fact. But the most important link monster in this deck is definitely Extra Hero Cross Crusader. He is the guy that just bridges a lot of gaps between all of your monsters, and you would usually get your malicious into and out of the graveyard. And he even searches a hero with a different name. So yeah, definitely fills up a lot of gaps that you otherwise would not have in your deck, and never ever leave home with less than 2 copies of this guy. But every build that I've seen of hero would usually never go below 2 copies. And then Infernal Divisor, just as a way to get Neos out of the deck. Never ever, by the way, send Neos to the graveyard with Vion's effect or any other effect for that matter. Hell, not even Fusion Destiny, because you would usually use him to get Infernal Divisor. And then, just as a note, Infernal Divisor and Cross Crusader, they have hero locks, which is why most hero builds are like 99% heroes and only have a off-theme archetype or 2. There's even like Fiendsmith heroes nowadays, but they would usually go through the Fiendsmith line first before they go into heroes, because they know for a fact that guys like Divisor and Cross Crusader will lock them out of everything else. So there is also that. But again, Infernal Divisor, his only purpose is to tutor Elemental Hero Neos or any other hero for that matter that you really need in hand at that moment. Then Dread Decimator is your finisher. You never go into him in your as your turn 1 play. He's always your last move in order to kill your opponent off. And then the honorary hero in this entire archetype, Predaplant, Verti Anaconda, Verts McGurts himself. Any 2 monsters makes Verti Anaconda, then Fusion Destiny into DPE, and your opponent will cry from there. And yeah, that is the entire hero deck here on Master Duel. Again, this is the most simple version of hero that stands at the current moment. There are lines now that involve the dark heroes that I'm gonna hold on if I can even if he even shows up here. Here we go. Evil Hero Neos Lord. The entire the deck that is built around this guy instead. There are even more intricate lines that involve him, and good God, it will only get even bigger from here. So that is this entire deck tech, and we're gonna cut it here. Yes, we're gonna cut it short here because I know for a fact that this deck tech is going to take a lot longer than usual because it's fucking heroes and they deserve the goddamn spotlight. So in the next video, which will come out on Tuesday, which is my normal release schedule, we will get to see gameplay with this legendary archetype. So if you guys like what you saw and you want to see the gameplay video, hit like, comment, subscribe, and share this among your friends. And until next time, toodles.